and welcome to another mock video. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Betty Starblaster. Now you may remember in my previous video I showed off 4 small quick mechs that didn't use any ball joints since I tend to over-rely on those pieces, I feel. Well, this was actually built before all of those builds. This is the first build I made that didn't use any ball joints because when I started working on it, the original idea was to just use some parts I'm not used to using, use some techniques I don't normally do, and just overall try some new things. I don't normally start by looking right at the cockpit, but I'm going to this time because this is where this build started. The cockpit piece, or the piece that I used as the base of the cockpit, is actually a Nexo Knight's armor piece. This would normally be the chest of a mech, but like I said, I wanted to try using some new techniques and using some pieces in unusual ways, and this was the first bit of inspiration that kicked off the build, and I was pretty excited once I'd done it. The surge of creativity that followed is when I decided not to use any ball joints in this design. I knew I had to continue to push my limits and try doing stuff a little differently. The end result was a mech that is very thin and spindly, which I kind of enjoy. It's far more bare bones looking than what I normally do, especially the arms here. The legs are also very long and thin, athletic looking, which I very much enjoy, and there's also this kind of, with the antenna and the wings and especially the dome canopy, this sort of 1950s retro futuristic Flash Gordon style look to it. In fact, because of that Flash Gordon style look, I decided to just straight up give this mech a ray gun. I'm not usually a huge fan of the tile held in a clip technique, even though it is technically legal according to LEGO, but I was already doing stuff differently for this build, so I decided to leave it. Also, it looks too good to do anything else. Around back, a couple of these megaphone pieces make up a pair of thrusters, which is not an original technique by any means, but I don't do it that often and I like how simple it is. I actually thought those pieces were retired at the time I used them, but I looked them up afterwards and nope, they are still part of LEGO's inventory. I also used one of those harpoon pieces to make this antenna around the back, which again is not an original thought by me at all, but it's not something I personally normally do, and it looks more interesting than just another bar piece. I also like this spoiler piece up here. It doesn't really serve a purpose, but it sure looks cool. For me, the most stock standard part of this build is probably these thighs. That's very similar to how I would have normally done it if I was using ball joints and building the way I normally do, but I also figured you can't get groundbreaking techniques out of literally every section of the build. Some things are just going to be plates on plates, and that's okay. These feet, however, were very fun to design. They were actually the last part of the build that I came up with, and they were originally meant to be the lower legs. Some way through the building process, I decided it wasn't working out, so I switched to the design I ended up going with. But then when it was time to build feet, I realized that this assembly actually looked pretty good as a foot, so I went with it. The ankle is kind of hard mounted in there, there's no bend in it, although you can kind of fake it by bending the toe forward and following up with the heel. So even though the ankle itself doesn't bend, the foot is flexible enough to kind of make up for it. The arms are very simple, using a candlestick piece to provide a little bit of swivel and also just a little bit of extra length. And the flag piece used as a wing here just provides a little bit of extra substance so that it's not too bare bones, and also kind of adds to the look of the mech. Also, this waist was fun to make. There's not that much articulation in it. It is a hinge joint in there, so I guess if you wanted to, you could angle this forward and then bend the hinge a couple joints, or a couple clicks, but I don't really use it as an ab crunch or anything like that, but now that I think about it, it is totally possible. As for Betty Starblaster herself, I've decided she doesn't actually exist in my LEGO world. She exists in the LEGO Classic Space Universe. I mean, just look at her. Someone this happy and joyful and pure doesn't deserve to live in a cyberpunk dystopia. They should be out in the universe seeking adventure. And so I like to imagine Betty jumping into her mech, which she calls the Andromeda, and exploring the stars, getting into all sorts of adventures with Blacktron, Space Police, Explorions, Ice Planet, all kinds of stuff like that. And as always, if you like this build and want to make it yourself, the instructions are available over on my Payhip page, which will be linked in my pinned comment down below. But until next time, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you really like this video, feel free to subscribe and tell me what you thought about Betty and her mech. Until next time, I've been Mindbender, and I will talk to you later.